announcing plans to send 1,200 National Guard troops to the Southwest. Once there, they will assist with the battle against drug smugglers and monitor traffic at border crossings. The troops are expected to stay there a year. Right now, there are about 130 to 140 National Guardsmen in Arizona. Hours after announcing that the troops would be sent, the president called on Republicans for more help with the immigration battle.
What I told my Republican colleagues is, look, I'll be there with you in terms of securing the border. That's part of my responsibility as commander-in-chief and as president. But you've got to meet me on solving the problem long term. It's not enough to just talk about National Guard down at the border. You don't even have to meet me halfway. I'll bring most Democrats on these issues. I'm just looking for 8 or 10 of you. You know, the day has passed when I expected this to be a full partnership. I mean, it's just, you know, I understand the strategy is sitting on the sidelines.
Joining us now to react is Utah Senator Orrin Hatch, a Republican and member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, thank you so much for being back here with us. Your reaction to, the president's remarks that we saw last night, and also to his announcement that he will be sending these 1,200 troops to the border.
Well, it's a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde approach. They criticized the Arizona state legislature and the Arizona people for passing a law that protects the borders that the federal government should be supporting. And then he kind of admits, well, maybe there is a problem down there, and sends 1,200 troops. Well, I think Senator McCain is right. There should be at least 6,000 troops there. There are over 1 million people come through Arizona that are illegal, a number of whom are criminals. People have been killed, property destroyed, wilderness damaged. I mean, it's about time the federal government realizes that it has a major role, and the first role ought to be protecting the borders. And I think whether it's Republican or Democrat administrations, we ought to do that. And they shouldn't spend all their time trying to find fault with people who are trying to resolve the matter. 71% of the people in Arizona agree with the legislation that was passed.
No sooner did we hear from the president that 1,200 troops would be going to the southern border than we heard some Republicans come out and suggest that those troops may be essentially assigned to desk duty, that they wouldn't actually be patrolling the border. Is that your understanding, sir? And what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I don't know what they're going to be doing, but it's interesting to me that the president goes out and demagogues this issue like Republicans aren't willing to do anything about immigration. Sure, we're willing to do something, but first, let's take care of the border so that we're serious, so that we stop the 1 million+ people coming across the border every year, and start getting people obeying our laws, and start getting people respecting our laws as well. And then let's sit down and work on it. But it's just a cynical ploy right now. They know in this election year they could never pass an immigration bill through the Democrat Party, let alone the Republican Party.
Is that the case? Because the president seemed to be suggesting that's not true in those remarks we heard last night.
Well, it's not true, and he knows it, and we all know it. You don't have enough time to get a bill that important through, and frankly, it's going to take both parties. Remember, in 2007, the immigration bill fell on a bipartisan basis. So this is a cynical thing to try and, I think, mobilize people in the country to vote Democratic, when in fact they're not going to do anything about it. I can guarantee you that. Now, I think we have to do it in the future, but it isn't going to happen unless we take care of the border first. And if we don't do that, my gosh, I don't see how you can get the people together to be able to do the hard work.
I have to ask you two important questions that relate to your work on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator. Sure. Number one, news breaking today that the Justice Department is moving closer to filing challenge against that Arizona immigration law. They haven't actually filed the complaint, but they're moving closer to it. It looks like it's gotten some favorable reviews inside the DOJ to go ahead and challenge that law. Can anything be done at the congressional level if folks like you object to that challenge?
Well, let me just say, you read the law, it says that it will be implemented in a manner consistent with federal laws regulating immigration, protecting the civil rights of all persons, and respecting the privileges and immunities of the United States. I think they better think twice before they start interfering with the laws of the state of Arizona. Look, the federal government's complicit here. The federal government hasn't done its job. The Arizona people, 71% of them supported this legislation that basically codifies in state law the federal laws. And whether you like it or not, They're trying to protect their borders and protect their communities. And frankly, the federal government better get its act in order. I think we better quit playing politics with this and do what really needs to be done. All of us want that done right.
Now,
and 1,200 people isn't going to do it.
I have one other question I need to get to. You know, while the Department of Justice is considering challenging the Arizona law, one thing they are not considering doing is appointing a special prosecutor to investigate whether the White House potentially offered a bribe or something short of a bribe to Joe Sestak in exchange for a promise to get out of the primary contest against Arlen Specter. This is what Congressman Sestak alleged happened. He says it happened. Somebody from the White House came to him when he was running against Arlen Specter and said, get out of the race in exchange for a job at the White House, and it's rumored to be the position of Navy Secretary. And now the White House has not commented on it other than to say they don't think anything inappropriate happened. I'm just hearing in my ear that you, on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and other Republicans have just fired off a letter to the Attorney General, Eric Holder, who has said he will not appoint a special prosecutor. But what are you demanding of him?
Well, I think we've asked for a special prosecutor. Virtually every Republican has asked it. Look, these are serious charges. You can't just brush them aside. When Joe Sestak, a member of Congress, said that something was done that literally is violative of our laws, serious laws, it ought to be looked into and it ought to be resolved. And the Justice Department has an obligation to look at it. They can't just brush this aside. They should look at it. It may be nothing in the end, but right now it looks like they're trying to cover it up.
What can you get? Independent counsel, special prosecutor? You know, what would satisfy you?
Well, it wouldn't take much to satisfy me because I think basically the Justice Department ought to investigate it. The questions ought to be asked. Congressman Sestak ought to have to testify under oath. He ought to have to tell whatever the claim he has made, what it is, and he ought to be able to express that, and he ought to express it freely. And we ought to get to the bottom of it because it's a serious charge. There's no use kidding about it.
All right, Senator Orrin Hatch, always appreciate hearing your insights on everything. Thanks so much for being on.
Nice to be with you.
Well, new reaction to hundreds of public union protesters storming a private home in the Washington